Welcome to Nurses Out Loud, where we delve into deeply complex and sensitive issue, the ethics surrounding medical interventions for minors, specifically the use of puberty blockers and hormones. As society evolves, so too do our understanding of gender identity and the ways in which we support young people navigating these identities. However, this topic raises important ethical questions that merit careful examination. Imagine a young person struggling with feelings of gender dysphoria. They approach their healthcare provider, hopeful for a solution that could help them feel more comfortable in their own skin. In recent years, puberty blockers and hormone therapies have been presented as options that can alleviate distress and support young individuals in their journeys. Yet, amidst this hopeful narrative, significant ethical concerns emerge. At the heart of this debate is the principle of informed consent. In the medical field, informed consent is a foundational tenet, ensuring that patients understand the risks, benefits, and long-term implications of their treatment choices. But what happens when the patient is a minor? Can we generally say that a child or adolescent has the capacity to fully grasp the consequences of such a profound medical decision? Many argue that, given the developmental stage of a young person's brain, their ability to make informed choices is limited. The areas of the brain responsible for decision-making and understanding long-term effects are still maturing during childhood and adolescence. This brings us to the question of autonomy. While respecting a young person's autonomy is crucial, we must ask ourselves, to what extent should minors be given agency over medical decisions that could affect their entire lives? External pressures, whether societal, familial, or cultural, can influence a young person's choices, complicating the notion of true autonomy. Are they making informed decisions based on a deep understanding of their identities? Or are they responding to influences beyond their control? Furthermore, we cannot ignore the long-term consequences of medical interventions like puberty blockers and hormone treatments. While these options may provide immediate relief from gender dysphoria, the potential risk and unknowns associated with them necessitate a cautious approach. A prominent example is a 10 million NIH, aka taxpayer, funded study led by Dr. Joanna Olson Kennedy, which examined the effects of puberty blockers on 95 American children with an average age of 11 over 2 years. Dr. Olson Kennedy has not yet published those results, citing concerns that they could be weaponized by critics of transgender healthcare for minors. The findings from this significant study revealed that puberty blockers did not significantly improve the mental health of the participants, a conclusion that raises further questions about the efficacy of these treatments. Critics argue that withholding the results contradicts scientific integrity and deprived the public that they funded of crucial information, especially since the study has the largest grant ever awarded in the US on this subject and sits on data that could inform ongoing discussions. Interestingly, Dr. Olson Kennedy noted that while participants were generally in good mental health during the study, earlier data indicated that about 25% had experienced depression or suicidal thoughts prior to treatment. This contradiction adds another layer of complexity to the conversation. Public sentiment reflects this tension as well. A recent Washington Post KFF study found that a majority of US adults oppose puberty blockers and hormone treatments for minors. As we embark on this discussion, we're going to also discuss the ethical dilemmas medical professionals face when bombarded with this narrative that is going against all known science. A courageous provider who works for Dignity Healthcare sent me the learning module training slides every person working there needed to complete. This has been happening all across America. We'll let you decide what you think. Unpacking this with me is the courageous, truthful therapist, Pamela Garfield, and author of A Practical Guide to Gender Distress, who gained notoriety when she spoke out as a dissenting voice on social media. And a provider who went through this same training, had spiritual and medical concerns, reached out to me as well. Together, we'll explore the nuanced layers of this issue, aiming to foster a dialogue that is both respectful and informative. How can we support young people and their identities while ensuring they are equipped to make decisions that reflect their true selves and values while honoring our integrities and values as healthcare professionals? Join us as we unpack the ethical implications of medical interventions for minors, aiming for a deeper understanding of this critical topic in today's healthcare landscape and voting, right? That it's on the ballot. It's on the ballot, guys. Medical freedom is on the ballot on November 5th. Welcome, Pamela. Thank you for being here.
Hi.
Hello, and thank you for being here, provider number one.
Hi.
I appreciate it. That's what I decided to label her, is because it could be an NP, PA, or an MD. So it's a provider that is caring for your children, essentially. And you know what? Before we get started, Pamela, I forgot to include your recent removal from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about that and who the keynote speaker was there. God.
So I was at the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's a huge conference in Orlando, Florida. Thousands of people were there. I don't know what the head count was, but it was ginormous. People were there from across the world, actually. There were international people there. And the keynote speaker was Mr. Rachel Levine.
Mm-hmm.
I even have a picture with him because he didn't know who I was, and I posed. And both me and another mother named Erin Friday, who has been fighting this issue really hard because her daughter got caught up in this. And she pulled her daughter out, and Erin has gotten really passionate about this subject. So she tweeted a photo of her and Mr. Rachel Levine and said, "You don't know it yet, but you have met your biggest nemesis."
Love it. So this is Rear Admiral Rachel Levine, who is clearly a man that dresses, talking about that, let's go back just a little bit here, because I want to talk about how we came to use these terms. Because if you listen to me, you know that I always say words matter, right? Words matter and definitions matter, and then I also like to, move it to the Bible, right? And the beginning was the Word. Jesus is the Word. Okay. So, the fact that we have, the word that we're supposed to follow and how words do matter. I think it's important that if we talk about the history of this. So back in the 90s, we would call people that were like Rear Admiral Rachel Levine, transvestites, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm
that was
not sure
the
of the
term.
details of what his transition is because there's a difference between someone who is medicalized, meaning if he's taken hormones or if he's gotten any surgeries, then they're called transsexuals. But if you're more of a cross-dresser, then you're a transvestite. Those were the distinctions. Now it's all been blurred together because you don't really get the same benefits or you're not seen as a protective class the way they're looked at now. So now they're all blended together. You can even really do nothing, not present as anything, not even change your name, but say you're non-binary and suddenly you're part of this protected class.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, and going into this conversation, guys, if you're confused, well, so are we,
That's the
honestly.
intention. That is
Yeah.
the intention. It is to create chaos. This is what we're talking about is different from the transsexual and transvestite thing, which wasn't great for other reasons, but we're talking now about what's called queer theory. And queer theory is about turning reality and truth on its head. And the intention is to create chaos, destroy families, destroy truth. It's real dystopian.
Hmm. Horrible. And it's also evil, right? I mean, in the
Mm.
Bible, we talk about, that Satan, the enemy, is the author of confusion. Okay. We have to be confused because then if we're confused and nobody knows what's right or what's wrong, I mean, they did the same thing to us during COVID. We know what our ethical principles are. We know what the best protocols are for people experiencing certain symptoms, but they made everybody so confused that nobody did anything.
Yeah, mask,
And
don't mask, double mask, triple mask. You got your vaccine. It's okay. You don't need a mask now. You do need a mask. I think it's similar. I think the confusion was intentional. I mean, at first I was naive and thought they just didn't know what they were doing, and now I believe it was very nefarious and intentional to make us all confused.
yeah. Yes, 100%. So I went into Chat GPT and I asked them the milestones of this transgender. So it said late 1990s to 2000, transgender word just came on the scene. We, for, the next 10, 20, 25 years, we would call people who were a man and dressed as a woman, a transvestite or crossdresser. And the same could be for a woman, dressed as a man. The mid 2000s, it says that activism around gender identity expanded, starting to replace the more stigmatized, right? Stigmatized word transvestite. And then we started recognizing gender dysphoria, and the 2010s with the rise of social media, transgender individuals were able to come out. We saw them more, which is fine, right? Everybody has their own choice to act, dress and act the way they want to. But then they started having terms like gender non-conforming, non-binary, gender queer, right? And then in 2013, the American Psychiatric Association updated the DSM-5, replacing gender identity disorder with gender dysphoria. And I believe you have something to say about that DSM-5, Pamela. Do you? You want to
Yeah,
interject?
so they changed it from gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria so that to take away the stigma, as you were explaining in that description, but they still wanted to have it in the book so that insurance and medical systems would still cover the treatments. So in the if you look at the DSM-5, which came out in 2014, that was the latest revision. It the trans activists actually reject it. A few things in there. It says you need to have those pervasive feelings of being uncomfortable as the sex you're born as for at least 6 months. But nowadays, they don't wait 6 months. They don't even wait 1 week or 1 day. Oftentimes, you can get hormones and be even get a letter for surgery within one session. So they certainly aren't waiting the 6 months. The other thing, when I've been to some trainings to learn about this, they said that the DSM is too binary. It's too stuck in the binary. They're offended by the word crossdresser, not for the reasons that we might be. They're offended by it because that's too binary. That implies there's a way to dress for men and a way to dress for women. But for them, there you could be partially male, partially female, or neither, or or both or some fictional character. It doesn't matter. Again, like I said, queer theory is about completely upending reality and any sense of logic or truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So the American Academy of Pediatricians, this is a big event that our nation's pediatricians get together, right? And you guys had a table. Tell us a little bit about that.
And so I attended this conference. We paid for this table. I believe, from what I read in the article, wasn't in charge of the payments, but they paid $25,000 for this table, is what I read. And I'm not sure if that's true, but they spent a lot of money, regardless if I'm not getting that number exactly correct. And it had me, a licensed clinical social worker, another licensed counselor. I don't know what her credential is, but also a very experienced counselor, also a mother who brought her daughter out from the trans ideology, and then a lawyer and a mother who also brought her daughter out of the trans cult. And then we had four detransitioners with us. So people who once believed they were trans. In fact, all the people that were with us were people that had medicalized. Some of them had surgeries. Two of them had the what they call top surgery or a double mastectomy. Chloe Cole was one of the people that was with us. There was a man there who self-identifies as gay, but he thought because he's such a feminine man that meant that he was a woman, and he realized that he could just be he's just a man that's a little more feminine than the typical man.
Mm-hmm.
And he's learned to embrace his manhood. And so we had basically patients who have been harmed by this gender medicine talk interfacing with doctors at this conference. Most of the doctors were just uninformed. They weren't true believers in this. They just were really repeating the mantras that have been told to them, and probably some of the trainings that we're going to talk about later in this talk. And they wanted to impress us and tell us how accepting they were. They used the names and the pronouns. And then, we gently talked to them about how that might influence children. And have they thought about some of the underlying issues that might be happening, and how much they involve the families, and do they know what happens when they get referred to a gender clinic, and were they familiar with some of the data that has come out in the latest year, like the CAS review, which came out of the UK after the Tavistock clinic was shut down. So we were having really good conversations with doctors who were really open to hearing new information. We didn't get into any fights or anything like that. And a lot of them were very compassionate, specifically towards the detransitioners who told their personal stories. And they're very lovely people. And they're really good at not being angry, not being blaming, not being confrontational, but just being really honest and earnest about sharing this information so that people can really understand without that like anger, frustration tone. So that was the tone of our existence there. And on there was a 3-day conference. On the third day, when we came to set up our materials, the security approached us and told us that we needed to leave immediately. We had 5 minutes to pack up our things, and we were escorted out by security. We weren't told why. We weren't told what rule we broke. The only explanation they could give us was that somebody in our group from last year had broken a rule, but they couldn't tell us what rule. They couldn't tell us who it was. And our group wasn't even there last year. There were 2 people who were there last year with a different group. My guess, it was Chloe Cole, who didn't break a rule or do anything wrong, but she's just really hard to argue with, and because she speaks the truth, and she's really
It's her experience, her
easy
lived
to talk to.
experience. Yeah.
And she's so bright, and so she's really good at explaining why this is harmful and how it harmed her. And so we were a symbol of truth. They had to kick us out. I did get it all on video. If people who are watching who saw this on video, Matt Walsh actually tweeted about it from the Daily Wire. So it did go viral when it first happened. I'm the one behind the camera, so I was videotape.
Okay.
I was the camera girl, videotaping the whole thing
Were you
of
nervous
us
about
being
doing
escorted
that?
out.
Were you
Oh, they
nervous about pulling out your camera and recording?
I was not nervous at all. In fact, one of the security officers told me to put my phone away, and I just ignored her. I just completely ignored her. She tried twice, and I said, "No, I have a right to do this. This is a public place." She's like, "Can you please stop that?" I'm like, "No, And then it just kept rolling, and then they backed off. Honestly, the security officers were not involved in any of this. I don't think they even worked for the AAP. I think they worked for the building, the facility that the conference was held at. They had no investment in the situation. They were just really following orders, but not even realizing they were following bad orders. Not like, we use this Nazi comparison, but they really didn't even recognize. It was actually the neatest part was when the security officers were listening to the detransitioners and the mothers talk to the camera about why this is wrong and the feelings they had around it. A lot of the security officers were standing behind us, nodding their heads and learning a thing or two about what's going on in this medical scandal.
Mm-hmm. So it's true. I mean, we are the silent majority, essentially. Like, guys, most people understand how evil and wrong this is. I mean, basic things like children can't get a tattoo that's permanent, right? They have to wait till they're
Absolutely.
18.
Absolutely.
You want to weigh in on this provider one?
Yeah,
I provider.
Well, I mean, exactly. You can't vote until you're 18. You can't get a tattoo. You can't drink until you're 21, but you're allowed to do such completely permanent or, semi-permanent, or depending how far you've gone with it, damage to your body, that these children may not ever be able to have a normal life. And the scary thing is that, there are kids who are tomboys and, boys who may like to cook and do crafts. And, that was all okay when we were younger. But now it's like, you have to worry about your kid's counselor in school telling them, oh, maybe you're really just a boy, or maybe you're just really a girl, and kind of planting that idea in their heads. And when kids are so young, they're so open to anything really, that adults are telling them.
Right.
So it's very confusing.
What about this? Here's an example. What if there's a girl who's flat chested? Okay. And, that girl goes to her mom and is like, I want to be a female. I feel like I'm more feminine than I am presenting. I look like a boy, mom. Can I please just have breast surgery? And the mom says, I understand, honey. Just go through puberty. Just wait a few years. Let's see how you develop. So now the girl's 16 years old, 15 years old, and she says, okay, I've been going through puberty for 3 years and my breasts are still small. Can I have a breast implant? And the mom's like, okay, fine. You know what? I made a deal with you. Is there any surgeon out there that's going to put breasts into a 15-year-old to 16-year-old? I mean, heck, my son can have laser eye surgery to correct his vision, which we know works until his eyes are developed at 21 years old. Guys, like,
yeah,
it's nonsense.
I worked in pediatrics before, and a pediatric specialty, and I actually did meet a couple of 16-year-old girls whose parents did allow them to get breast implants, and I was shocked.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it is legal, unfortunately. I do remember having friends in high school getting breast reductions, but I don't know the legality of it all. It's not a great thing, but it is still different because we're not telling them to bend reality, and they're not expecting the world to bend reality around them. And then they still don't, I mean, obviously complications happen, but they don't lose complete function of their breasts. They don't lose their breasts entirely. So it's not a great thing, but it still doesn't compare.
Yeah, true. That might have been a poor example. I was just thinking, but yeah, it's just wild to me that there's certain things that we can do and can't do. But yes, there's been debate on whether it is sterilizing the child. And here's the thing, I guess, like you were saying, provider, it depends on how far you go with this. Right. It could just be holding off puberty. But the whole point is that we don't know. There's not long-term effects. And if you have some of the children, that have gone through this within the last 10 years, say, like you did, Pamela, at the pediatrics convention this weekend, we have to listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of magical thinking that's happening, and the authorities and the experts, quote unquote, I'm putting that in quotes, are
Mhm.
telling these doctors that it is reversible and harmless, and they don't stop and think. That was the thing I learned the most in this conference, is that most of these people aren't true believers. They don't even seem to have nefarious intentions, the ones that are executing it or even just making their referrals. They just don't stop and think. They're not thinking about common sense that yes, stopping puberty is going to cause health issues. We do have evidence coming from Sweden and other countries that young people are having a lot of spinal issues. There is a study that shows that it causes brain swelling, which leads to blindness. The development, cognitive development, the heart and lung development, all other things that happens to a person when they grow through puberty are being stunted through these puberty blockers, but that is all being completely ignored. And that we are told over and over again that is reversible. They use like a weird metaphor. It's like a tape recording. You just rewind it or you put it on pause. Yeah, you put it just, we're just putting it on pause. And some of the really crazies want to put every single child on puberty blockers so that they can decide what gender they are in the future because we're just putting it on pause. Now, if that's not playing God, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Very, very true. All right. Well, I can't wait to get into the second half. I'm going to be pulling up those slides and we're going to go through them together. We're going to have to do it very quickly because there are a bunch of them, but it'll give you an idea of what your doctor and your nurse practitioner and your physician's assistant are having to educate themselves on. And we'll let you guys decide what you think. But guys, check out Chemical Free Body. It is our preferred sponsor here on Nurses Out Loud. If you go to chemicalfreebody.com/out loud, you will see Malcolm's Healthy Gut Bundle, which is a trio of supplements that you can use to help detox your gut. And I like going on this. I started on this product back in August of last year, I believe. And it just replaces the minerals and deficiencies that our soil has been so depleted of. And I just drink it in some water once or twice a day. So go check that out. chemicalfreebody.com/out loud and help boost your energy. And we will be right back after the break. Welcome back to Nurses Out Loud. I am your host, Nurse Jody O'Malley, and you have been listening to Pamela Garfield. I want to say Jaeger, or is it Jaeger?
It's Jaeger, like Jägermeister.
That's what I thought, girl. She is a licensed clinical social worker and author of A Practical Response to Gender Distress. You will be able to, you could Google that. You could get this on Amazon, right?
Yes, it's available on Amazon.
Yep. And people can find you at the Truthful Therapist everywhere, Pamela.
Yeah, the truthfultherapist.org is my website. Truth Therapist is my Twitter. The Truthful Therapist is my Instagram. And at the Truthful Therapist is a YouTube. But you just put in my name or the Truthful Therapist, you'll find me pretty quickly.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for speaking out. We need bold, courageous people like you more and more. And I hope that this will give you guys the courage that you need to speak out against this. So essentially, I let the provider go through these slides because I wanted to get her opinion on them as well. And also I wanted to bring in a licensed clinical social worker who can weigh in on the ethical, the ethical, what am I thinking? I just drew a blank. Implications of these types of learning modules. So this module has been sent to every single person who has, I believe everybody who is in patient care has to do this: nurses, doctors, PAs, NPs. And the learning objectives of this is to inform and educate about the transgender and gender non-conforming patient non-discrimination policy and procedure. They provide guidance related to the arrival process, healthcare worker interaction, room assignment, and access to bathrooms for transgender and gender non-conforming patients. And lastly, understand and communicate the policy and procedure, its impact to your daily work and connection to common spirits, stated missions, values, and vision. Okay. So they start off with the World Health Organization saying that enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being. And I believe that that's true, right? I don't think any of us would really disagree on that. But Pamela, how many people identify as transgender in America that can you give us a number?
I honestly can't. I don't know because it's growing so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm honestly not sure. They used to say it was like 1% of the population. I honestly have no idea. I don't think anybody really knows at this point. And it keeps changing. I mean, it keeps changing by the individual because on one day someone will be trans or they'll be non-binary, they'll identify as a cat, or they'll identify as whatever. And so how do we know? How can we keep track of these numbers? I think it's pretty impossible.
Mm-hmm. No, it is. I agree with you. I mean, it's the same as what they did with the vaccine, right? The COVID vaccine. Oh, wait, hold on. You're not fully vaccinated
Up
unless
to date.
or up to date. You have to wait 2 more weeks, and now they have more. It's ridiculous. But again, guys, remember, it is designed to confuse you. So
I
the
just want to
gender,
comment that one quote. Can I just comment that one quote is
yes.
very ironic because if you encourage someone to go ahead with these trans procedures, you are harming them physically, you are compromising their health 100%. It's not just like a side effect that happens to a select few. If you give a woman testosterone, cross-sex hormones, you are shortening her lifespan. She could come up with cancer, blood clots. She will have so many physical issues, and the longer she's on it, the more health issues she will have. So they are promoting something that is creating poor health. So that's just very ironic that they started with that quote.
Yes, and you think they're also creating lifelong big pharma users.
Yes.
Yeah.
For multiple reasons. Yes.
So is Dignity or Common Spirit provider, is this a Christian organization?
So I'm not 100% sure the answer to that because they were, I think, initially, and then they merged with Common Spirit. So I can't find a complete answer about that. However, several of the hospitals within the system, at least here in Arizona, are Catholic.
Okay, well, their mission clearly states that they make their mission statement. We make the healing presence of God known in our world by improving the health of the people we serve, especially those who are vulnerable, while we advance social justice for all. Their vision is a healthier future for all, inspired by faith, driven by innovation, empowered by humanity. And their values are compassion, inclusion, integrity, excellence, and collaboration. So my first question is, what God are they talking about?
I'd like to know that too. And if you notice all of those, there are so many buzzwords in there that if you do listen to Dr. James Lindsay, that is all Marxist right then and there. That entire mission statement and everything in there it has so many Marxist undertones in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I was going to bring him up. His book, The Queering of the American Child, came to mind. I was privileged to be able to read it before it was released. So I got a preview of it. And a lot of the concepts that are in that book and a lot of the concepts he speaks about with queer theory are in this training.
Well, here's an interesting here on this slide. It says that this Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging was established to amplify our ministries, foundation value, our ministries.
Yep.
And their purpose is their office exists to manifest God's love and respect and compassion, especially the most vulnerable. But again, I ask, which God are they talking about? It certainly isn't the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because, you know, in the Word of God, it clearly outlines that, you know, this is really what do they say in the days of Noah, right? As in the days of Noah, so too will be in the second coming of man, right? And in the days of Noah, there were gods that were there that were gods of transgender. I believe it was Ishtar. I'm not really sure, but Jonathan Cahn, if you look up Jonathan Cahn or Hope of the World Ministries, he goes into a very good explanation of how the gods are spiritual entities and they have returned. And that when you have a nation who was founded by God, I mean, Christopher Columbus was a Jew, right? He came over to America to escape the Jewish persecution that were happening and to find, you know, religious freedom. And I never knew that. I just found that out. Did any of you guys know that Christopher Columbus was a Jew?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I knew he was Italian. I didn't know he was Jewish, actually.
No, he
now I'm
acted like he
embarrassed.
was.
As a Jew, I feel like I should have known that.
Oh, are you a Jewish? Okay. Well,
Yes.
well, it's very interesting. No, he had to disguise himself as an Italian because of, you know, the persecution they were having.
Huh.
So
I'll have to read into that more. But
it's
definitely they're not worshiping the God of the Bible, but they are worshiping the God of woke and DEI and queer theory. And if you read his book, Unbelievable, I didn't realize, I thought it was sort of compared to a religion. It is a religion. They even, if you look at the Transgender Awareness Day, it lands right around the time of Easter. And that's not a coincidence because they actually see someone who's becoming trans as being resurrected, much like when Jesus was resurrected. And they truly worship the transness as a god, as some kind of, you know,
deity.
godlike deity. Yeah. So that it's not even a compare. People don't actually like to say that because the religion becomes murky when it comes to legality, but this is a religion.
100%. I mean, even, you know, even the whole, I just, you know, we won't get into it today, but research Easter. Research the name, research eggs, research dye, research fertility. That's going to take you guys down a rabbit hole. And I'll tell you, the rabbit hole that it led me down was that I stopped celebrating Christmas and Easter. Okay. Wow. And that might be a surprise to many of you guys, considering, you know, that I am really known as the ethical faith-based nurse. And that is because I, you know, started celebrating Passover and stuff that, you know, God tells us to celebrate, not all these other religions, to me, that really twist the whole meaning of it and make it about something completely other than, you know, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, right? Completely. But we won't get off on that tangent. As you guys can see here, there's definition, and they say here again, words matter. Okay. And definitions are important. Yes, they are. But they,
and all their definitions are ridiculous.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. So we're going to just go through this. If there's anything that speaks that speaks to you guys that you want to speak on, or you know what I'm talking about.
I want to hear from provider as you were going through this. Tell me what your thoughts and feelings were. And you had to deal with reading through this and required to do this.
So as I opened it up, I mean, I see the definitions and I'm like, okay, obviously we've all heard these before because it's being put in our faces everywhere we go. And I was appalled by that because they're forcing these made up definitions on us, first of all. I mean, the further, right. And the further and further that I got into it, it got worse and worse, which I wasn't actually expecting. But these definitions, you know, they're pushing these definitions on us. And, you know, as a Christian, God made man and God made woman. And as a healthcare provider, we're supposed to do no harm. And like you said, Pamela, the DSM-5 has gender dysphoria classified as a mental illness. So now we're supposed to, as healthcare providers, you know, give into this whole thing that these people are believing, and we're supposed to affirm their mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which we know is wrong. It's interesting.
Right.
So they're talking about gender nonconforming. In my opinion, just simply being gender nonconforming isn't a bad thing. That means you're possibly more feminine if you're a man, or you're more masculine. If a tomboy would be considered a gender nonconforming person. And the way we look at it is, okay, so a tomboy girl doesn't need any kind. Why would a doctor even need to know about gender nonconforming? That means that maybe it's a girl who likes to climb trees. What does that have? Maybe you might need to know if she broke her leg, or that she might be accident prone because she likes to do more athletic things or something. But in terms of this gender nonsense, it makes absolutely no sense. They mush it all together, and I think, like you said before, it's intentionally to confuse you.
Yeah, it's absolutely intentional. And we see here, yeah, like you just said, Pamela, like, fine, you want to dress more masculine or more feminine, that's fine. 100% do it. Be you, you
It's
know?
the most regressive thing. They're pushing us further back from the 1950s. The progressive ideas are the most regressive, especially when it comes to this gender stuff, because literally they'll label a child as being trans if they like to play with quote unquote boy toys or girl toys. Well, I thought if we're being progressive, we're not labeling toys as boys or girls. Some girls like trucks and some boys like dolls. Grew up on Free to Be You and Me, where the little boy liked to play with a doll, but that just meant he might probably will become a good father one day, and doesn't make him a girl. And they're saying now, they even have a graph where uh, there's Barbie on one side and G.I. Joe on the other. And they tell the children, are you more Barbie or G.I. Joe? And then there's a spectrum, and you could decide whether you're partially G.I. Joe or partially Barbie. Now, this is how they're confusing children. And then they go to a doctor who's trained on this and get cross-sex hormones to solidify and harm their health as a result of their interest in Barbie or G.I. Joe. Now, I don't think I could think of anything more regressive than that.
Yeah. Yes. And you know, here this HRC Foundation, I forget, I'm not going back to figure out what that stands for, but these definitions were provided by them. Okay. And remember in the beginning where it said words matter and definitions matter. They at the end of all of this confusion, complete confusion, it says healthcare terminology for transgender and gender nonconforming people is continuously changing.
And that's the tenets of queer theory. The fact that it's changing is not an accident. That's intentional to keep everybody confused and in this feeling of chaos. That's intentional. And the fact that a medical training, this isn't just coming from some activist. This is a medical training for doctors and nurses and physicians assistants, that they're learning language that is constantly changing, and you're told that flat out. That is insane.
Insane. And you know what else is insane are these next three questions. Okay. So you have to answer these next three questions correctly to demonstrate your knowledge of the gender identity and expressions definition in order to move forward with the course. So here's a question to ask yourself: true or false? Gender identity and gender expression are the same thing. Is it? False. Gender identity refers to one's innermost concept of self as a man, a woman, a blend of both, and neither. Gender expression refers to the external appearance of one's gender identity, usually expressed through behavior, clothing, body characteristics, or voice. 2, the term transgender refers to, and it's, you know, the correct answer is the term transgender is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity is different from sex assigned to them at birth.
And that right there, sex assigned at birth, that is the most ludicrous expression right there. Whose sex is assigned at birth? No, and if you believe in God, God assigned you your sex at birth. If you don't believe in God, you believe that it's science or nature that made you a man or a woman or a boy or a girl at conception. No one's assigning you. What is there, like a assembly line of boys and girls, and you just decide, or like a checklist. I'm going to assign this baby a boy, and I'm going to assign this baby a girl.
Right.
I don't know.
And maybe
What's between their legs. Who cares? Let's assign them this. Let's them assign them that. It's so funny if you really think about it. No. Doctors aren't assigning anything. It's observed.
It's fact, right? We know that a guy with, oh my gosh. What did you think, provider?
I think that it's ridiculous. I mean, you know, like Pamela said, you literally are assigned your gender by God. When the sperm fertilizes the egg, you get your chromosomes, and that's what dictates who you are.
And your DNA, right?
And your DNA.
Yeah.
And honestly, you know, this, to be honest with you, this whole thing is to discredit God's creation, all of this. And it's, I mean, what are we told the devil does? He lies, cheats, and steals, right? And his biggest thing is to go after God's most creation, and that's human beings.
What's interesting about this is that this offends both people who are not religious and people who are religious. So people who believe in science also are very offended by this, because they recognize that male and female are reality and truth. And they don't even need to believe in God or religion to still be very offended by all of this mess.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to go through a couple of scenarios here since time is winding down. I swear I need a Joe Rogan style podcast for so many of these things, guys.
This is a lot to go over.
It is. It really is. You know, how about we just pull up some, you know, some of these cartoons.
Scenarios.
Yeah, these scenarios.
Oh my gosh.
So we have this woman appearing in a blonde little bob with nice eyelashes and a doctor. And it says, hi, the patient says, hi, I'm Avery. I'm feeling pretty good. But actually, I prefer to use gender non-conforming pronouns like they and them. And so, did I go through that wrong? Oh.
Well, I know there's this training, because I looked at it earlier. That what really struck me about it was the tyrannical nature of it. That if you are a provider that either has religious views or just believes that this is wrong for one reason or another, it doesn't matter. You have to do this, or you're actually breaking these non-discrimination policies that they're putting upon doctors and nurses. So that, to me, it is so scary. So you've got that patient in that scenario, that cartoon, and this one here too. I think it's the next slide, about how they're demanding these pronouns be used. And to me, I see that as a problem. They're demanding speech. That's a version of narcissism right there. And to have, for a doctor to just go along with that is affirming a mental illness, as provider one said, and affirming new mental illnesses, because they're teaching them that the world will cater to them in a way that's unhealthy. So now a policy is enforcing doctors and nurses to reinforce ideas that are harming the patient, both emotionally and can lead to physical, or if they're not already in the medical sphere with a trans.
Yeah, 100%. You know, we see here where it looks like there's two nurses at the nurses station, and one of them says, hey, Marissa, did you see my patient in room 26? She's one of those gender non-conforming people. She's clearly a woman, but wants to be called they or them instead of she. I had to ask her about her genitalia to figure out what she really was. And then I had to ask her if she was taking testosterone. And then she responds, yes, I saw them earlier today. Why would you need to ask about their genitalia? That's not really relevant to their medical care. Also,
I want to hear from you guys, doctors.
Here,
what do you think about that?
Also, we really shouldn't be talking about this out in the open. That blew me away.
I was going to say, so as doctors, the medical implications of this, that if you really can't tell, or you don't know if someone's a male or female, doesn't that have a lot of medical implications? Isn't this dangerous, just physically dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's differences between men and women, and there's, you know, different medications we give, different treatments we give. I mean, even right down to if you need to put a Foley catheter in, you need to know what you're putting it in.
Yeah, so that's why in that little thing, like, oh, it doesn't matter. What do you need to know? Well, actually, you do. You're a freaking doctor in a hospital setting, and you
Right.
need to know, you know, what maybe how in medications are interacting, and you need to know if they're taking testosterone because, right, you might be
Mhm.
prescribing something that might interfere or interact with the testosterone, or they might be
Exactly.
acting, having certain behaviors, erratic behaviors that might be a result of the testosterone. That's something I learned working in mental health. I learned after the fact that there were kids that were having a lot of serious lability and severe mental health issues, and they were on testosterone. I wish I had realized that,
Mhm.
and that like they just ignore that, and they just keep putting them on more psychotropic drugs as opposed to recognizing that maybe if you're pumping them up full of cross-sex hormones, that might have something to do with their mood being completely erratic.
Well, and that's true too. And I'll tell you, part of my triage assessment is, are you undergoing gender transformation? And I nonchalantly, like right after I ask them what allergies they have, I say, so are you undergoing gender transformation? And you would be amazed. Everybody's like, what? What are you talking about? And I'm like, are you changing from a male to a female or female to male? And they're like, no. Like,
I
why
guess
would
it's
you even ask me that?
technically it's impossible anyway,
Yeah.
but
And
then you get into semantics.
right. And then I tell them, I said, oh, it's just part of our questions that we have to ask. Didn't you know, like, this is a big thing? And they're like, what do you mean it's a big thing? I said, oh, all of us are getting trained on this. And they're just blown away, you know. But here's something I want to discuss, because then we have to close up the show. So provider, one of the big ones too was how you admit a person to a room. So talk to us about that really quick.
Well, in the cartoon scenario that you see there, Samantha is a transgender woman. And because there are no private rooms in the hospital for her to be admitted to, she is allowed to room with a woman. So you are, per policy, permitted to room with the gender that you identify with, regardless of where you are in your transition. And quite honestly, there's no questions asked. So you could just have some perverted man come into the hospital and say, hey, I identify as a woman. My pronouns are she, her. And they'll say, okay, we're going to put you in a room with a woman. This is really dangerous. And this, again, goes back to do no harm. People in the hospital are vulnerable. If you've ever been a patient, you know that you are wearing a gown with things hanging out, you don't really have privacy, and it's hard enough to be roomed with somebody of the same sex as you.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of times you come out of surgery, you're groggy, you're on medications that are making you groggy. And that really just opens the door to somebody getting sexually abused.
Get
Mhm.
sexually abused. There's also, people that have trauma, right? Like, you're in a room with the lights off, sleeping. You wake up and say you see this man in the room,
Right.
that just got admitted, just got put in your room and is bunking with you. What if you do have some issues with that? I mean, I certainly would. A hundred
Well,
percent.
per their policy, you're not allowed to have issues with it. And you know what? I actually should point out that in that cartoon scenario, the white woman who is angry that a transgender woman is being put in her room was named Karen. I really don't find that a coincidence. And
Yep.
quite
Wow.
honestly, that's pretty racist if you think about it.
Mhm.
White women who complain about things have been labeled Karen. And there she is right in that picture. And, if Karen is upset, it clearly says in there, if Karen is upset, they will put a curtain or divider between the two beds. If Karen is still upset, then the first thing that they would do was move Karen to another room. So now Karen's losing her room because she's not happy about Samantha, the transgender woman, being in her room. So all the rights basically go to people who claim they're transgender. And you and I and any other patient has literally no rights and no say, because their rights that are given to by this hospital system are completely trump yours.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yep.
exactly what I say. Do you notice how this goes only one way, only in one direction? You must affirm the trans person. You must cater to the trans person. Legally, it looks like through this policy, they have to. Provider, you could probably say that you might lose your job or you will be disciplined if you do not cater to the demands and wants of the trans person. However, you have Karen who simply feels uncomfortable with a man in her room while she's vulnerable after having a medical procedure, and she's shipped out or she's ignored, she's dismissed. So this is scary.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
scary.
It's very scary, guys. And here's the thing. We need to talk about it. Okay. Their ethics is that because we have to have debates on things. Nothing is settled. Okay. Except that there is man and woman, and you're never going to change that fact. It is a fact. It is hormone. It is in your DNA. Now, how do we act and how do we approach people? Sure, there could be some sensitivity, but one must ask themselves, why the big push? Why the big push for a population that probably makes up less than 0.5% of, everyone out there? Why the big push? Why the big push to target children and have them participate in an experimental injection for COVID when they weren't even affected by it? Okay.
Right.
Why? We have to ask ourselves that. And
It's
please
nefarious.
reach out to us, nurses@americaoutloud.com. I would love to hear your comments. If you're watching a clip of this, please comment, please share, and we'll love to hear from you guys. Until next time, friends, be well, be safe, and God bless.